So we're going to go outside, and because the show's going to be outside, I just want us to get into a more natural space so that we can start to explore active listening and translation. So I would like to see how this choir would translate nature in various spaces using vocalizations. And begin the soundscape fade in on your own time. My name is Cass, and I'm the acting artistic director for Mount Royal Artio, specifically for this project. This show was called The Nature of Us, and it's an interdisciplinary devised work that we had done in collaboration with movement artist Kevin Jesuino. This is actually a continuation of a project that we had done with him earlier this year in June, I think. Because this is devised work, the choristers actually make most of the material, like 99% of the material that we used in the show was made by the performers. And it's the same thing with the earlier version of this show. This time I really wanted to bring it back to the performers. And so Kevin posed that question, are we going to be doing this, we're restaging the first one and adding on to it, or doing something entirely different? And I went back to the choir and I posed that question to them, because I really want all of us to feel like we have true ownership of the work that we're doing. So our first couple of rehearsals for this project were kind of just conversations. I mean, we spent 2.5 hour rehearsals just chatting the whole time. Our first rehearsal, we had a sort of post-mortem of the first half of the show, and we discussed all the things that we really enjoyed about the final performance and all the things that we felt didn't work as well, and we discussed the process and what we liked about the process, what didn't work as well for the process. And I just sat there like furiously taking notes on my laptop for the first two, not really doing a whole lot of creative work, but I thought it was an important conversation to have, given that this work doesn't just belong to me or Kevin or JL or the three of us collectively even, it's all of our work. And so yeah, I just wanted to give them the opportunity to have their thoughts and feelings heard. In each of your groups, find a space. This time, we're going to do a little bit of active listening, another minute. The rest of us are going to come to you. Group by group, we're going to present our soundscapes in just our small 3-person or 4-person groups. And then I would also like for us to do a second round where each of our groups finds interesting ways to interact with the environment to make sound. And again, we will present these little compositions to each other when we're done. I'll give you all like 8 minutes for that one. I'll dig! Sweet! Awesome. Some really cool standout elements for me were, I really liked your use of your necklace on the dome. That was really cool. Your clattering on here and then later on the dome really reminded me of rain, which I thought was cool. You're taking man-made elements and turning it into kind of a nature sound.
That was like heartbeat shit, which I loved. That was really awesome.
We did decide to go ahead and take what we had done in the first one and expand on that, which is really, really great. I'm actually quite thrilled that everyone as a collective was like, yeah, we want to do that. Because it's truly an opportunity to be able to revisit and develop work that you've already done. It's so rare that you actually get to do that in performing arts, right? So this was a wonderful way to like review what it was that we had left the audience with the first time around. And I would say that this is more of a reframing of the original show as opposed to just developing it. Because the original show, Divides, was, it started off with, all this negative, oh, everything's so bad. And, we touched on social divides, and we touched on spiritual divides, and we touched on ecological divides, and everything was just kind of bad. And then everything's all of a sudden fine. And we kind of ended off on a positive note. And the first thing, like, every chorister said to me was like, why though? Where did that happen? Because there was no clear turning point in the show. And we also felt that it was kind of disingenuous to, be like, oh yeah, now we're all together and we're all happy, because that is very much not where we are at in the world. And so we took this opportunity to take the work we'd done before and go, you know what, we're gonna take the impression that we left the audience with last time and totally turn it on its head and reframe it to something that felt a little more true to the world and to ourselves. And so we decided, what we want to say is, shit's still bad. So we had those 2 rehearsals that were just conversations, and that was all we'd had until Kevin came in and did a workshop with us. And for the most part, process was similar to what we had done for the Divides show. But this time we actually got on site immediately. So we went straight to where we knew we were going to be performing. And we spent 2 whole days just generating material, just using our bodies and our ears and our eyes and everything to listen to the space around us and, just let that into our bodies and then find a way to let it back out. One of Kevin's comments to me early on in the process was, I would really love for us to see if we can translate and transcribe the sound of the trees. And I was like, that's really, really cool. He's recently learned about graphic scores, which is a kind of compositional tool that I really, really love. And so I was really excited that he was going down, he went full bore down that road. He was like, let's make a graphic score of the trees. And I was like, I love it. So yeah, we had the singers just dancing and making up songs and making silly sounds and stuff like that, all inspired by the space that we were in. And we came up with so much material in those first 2 days. But yeah, it was so productive. It was so amazing to be in the space. It made my job so easy. The next 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsing was like, oh yeah, cool, we got it. We just need to piece it together now. Kevin and I were really keen on developing a little musical motive that we could use in the work that was representative of the resonant frequency of the Earth. Now, obviously, the actual resonant frequency of the Earth, which is 7.83 hertz, is inaudible to the human ear. But what I've done is I've kind of taken that way, way, way up. I'm like, okay, well, it's it's kind of like a flat B, which is way, way low. And so just using B as my basis, I developed 7.83. And it's just a triad, took the 3 numbers, 7, 8, and 3. And that was this. And so what I've got going here is we had three, so we split the choir into two groups, and one group would sing this resonant frequency of the earth. And so we would have, a couple of baritones on this bottom note, and then we had a tenor singing the third, and then we would shift between adding on that semitone. On top of that, we had another group of singers who were singing my transcription of the first few numbers of pi, because the earth is round. I know it's not a perfect sphere. However, that idea, that symbolism is there. And so while we have this underlying, we have this lovely little melody, this pi melody over top. And, just by happenstance, they resolve really nicely together. And so it just winds up this beautiful, harmonious little B major chord. Like there's an underlying narrative. There's like a little bit of a thread. We wanted it to be a series of events that made sense, and we wanted to kind of, especially for the material that we had from the first show, we wanted to really take some of the kinks out of the transitions and smooth things out, and we wound up actually like moving things around in the script from where they were before. And so like even when all was said and done with even that portion, it was nothing like what the original show was. I mean, there were obvious elements left from it, but it was a very different experience, and with obviously a very different message. After that first workshop weekend, Kevin went away and he was like, I'm gonna do the graphic scores for this. I want to like sit down and draw out what we have done here. So he did, and he sent them my way, and I think they are the most wonderful, cool little scores ever. The hope is that, anybody else can look at these scores and interpret them any way that they want to, which is the point, kinda. And I think he did a really good job of capturing the soundscapes that we had invented in that first weekend. And it was just really magical to see how his theater and movement brain took the sound world and put it onto paper. So the soundscape is actually kind of for the first, there are two soundscapes, and one of them is the first act and the other one is the second act. And Act 1 is meant to be this, it's meant to be this idea of the birth of the universe and the birth of plants and the birth of human life, right? So there are 4 segments to Act 1, and it's kind of divided up into these 4 hours, right? So there's like the start of the universe, which is there's nothingness, right? There's this compositional tool in contemporary composition. It's a clock face. It's just a clock face. In our Western 12-tone equal temperament system, there are 12 pitches in a scale, and so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, just like the numbers on a clock. And so I took this idea of like time and the birth of the universe and the birth of all these things and how these things kind of happen one after the other and coexist and continue. And so I took the clock face thing from music theory, and I took this idea of like the birth of the universe, and we're like, okay, cool. So they're like layered in, right? So the Act 1 score actually has 2 scores built into it. It's kind of really meta and weird, but it's really great. So there's kind of the musician's version of the score, and then there's the timekeeper's score. I brought these flashcards that are just like various different shapes, and all I did was stick up a flashcard and go, okay, everybody, sing what this shape would sound like. And so I assigned the flashcards to the different hours. The first 3 hours got flashcards assigned, and then the last hour is chaos, right? Because it's all of these things coexisting. It's here's the universe, and here's plant life, and here's human life, and here's like construction crap, and here's like all this stuff. It's just meant to be chaos. So like for the last hour, there's no specific shape. It's just like anything goes, right? Just sing, make weird noises, choose silence, whatever. But yeah, so for each hour they're singing different shapes, and so it gives each one kind of a life of its own, or like a character of its own. So our first hour started out here. And so we would have that, and we would cycle, and we'd have approximately 3 minutes where all the singers in their own time are kind of cycling on this, and they're going through all these shapes as well. This is where I had the shape flashcard. So I'm starting with the circle, and then I'm moving on to a triangle, moving on to another one. Then another person takes over, and so there were 4 people. They were the timekeepers, and they were the people who were indicating when these pitch shifts were happening, or these chord changes were happening. And so we moved from this developing into the third hour, which is basically your do, re, mi of any normal scale, right? So that develops into there, and again, they have 3 new shapes, 3 minutes to go through that. And then the third timekeeper goes, and then that's the second last hour, and then the final hour is. And so you'll notice that as time is moving on, these chords are expanding, becoming a little more open. And so we start that first one with that really tight minor second there. And then we're slowly expanding that interval. And then we take this upper interval in the third hour and expand that. And then for the final one, it is fully open. And this is a perfectly symmetrical chord. And so from this middle note out is a perfect inversion. Yeah, so that constant expansion of the chords kind of signifies the expansion of the universe as time progresses. So as the universe is just beginning and growing, and then humans and plants happen, and everything gets, you know, as big as the universe, so our chord expands as well. This is such like it's such a buried little Easter egg, right? Like you in the audience sitting there, you're not really necessarily gonna know that that's what's going on. And you're gonna hear that, but you're not gonna know necessarily what that is, and you're not supposed to know what it is, right? Like this is just like what we did behind the scenes. This is the significance of these chords. It's, you know, this is time passing musically. I wanted to keep these chords really simple because during that first act is when we are doing the most play with spatial relationships, and I really wanted the singers to explore vocal texture more than anything, which was why the flashcards were so important. Because I really wanted to, you know, show you, na na na, and you could sing that over and over. It gets kind of boring, but I wanted them to take this simple little chord that signifies a moment in time and tell a story with it. How is the universe birthing? How is the universe becoming? How is it growing, right? What does it sound like when you take this or this? And, you know, how do those things signify, how can you make that sound like, okay, now plant life is burgeoning forth? And how can you make it sound like human life is now burgeoning forth? And so using the shapes instead of specifically just the pitches or text or, you know, like a specific chord progression per hour kind of thing, or like specific vowels, whatever have you.
This can be anything. It can be pitches, it can be mouth sounds, you could strike your body. Ha, 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 ha. Perhaps this is a field of flowers. Perhaps it is the stars in the sky.
I wanted us to be able to illustrate the kind of chaos that came from the universe's expansion. More stuff in it. It's bigger, there's more space, and you're just cramming more stuff in it, and people being the loudest and noisiest and most chaotic of all. So human life is that fourth and final hour where there are no shapes anymore. It's just fair play. You take this and you do whatever you want with that, right? It doesn't even have to be on pitch anymore. And I had it so that choristers were all crescendoing, crescendo, like big, on individual terms, and then harsh cutoff. Each person, they don't have to be together, it didn't have to be cued, it was just everybody kind of gets big until they have nothing more to give, and then it stops. And there's silence. The universe is here. People are here. And then there's the heartbeat pattern that comes in, made only by the people first, before the taiko drums come in. Act 2 was pretty much entirely generated on our first day of our workshop, and like we did very little to change it because what we had done the first day was just is absolute gold. Kevin had brought in a list of plants that are native to Alberta. And it was like, hey, research it, figure out its name, its Latin name, 3 interesting facts about it. And then we went through a little period where we generated like what the dance of that plant might look like. And then what does the song of that plant look like, or sound like rather. And so that like all the material that was generated there was like so cool, such gold. They have this thing in acting that's called, like yes and so you're not supposed to say no to anything, right? If somebody offers you something, you take it, you say yes, and then you add on to it and you say yes and that is so this choir, even though not everybody in the choir has specifically a theater background, because of all of the wonderful work that we've been doing with JL over the years, doing this choral theater kind of stuff. Yeah, these are the most yes and people I've ever met. So we were like, yeah, here, plants, what do they sound like? How do they dance? And they just took it all in and went with it, and it was all like pure gold. It was so fulfilling to watch that process. And yeah, then to like throw shapes on top of that and be like, what does your plant sound like if it's this? And they just go with it. Yeah, and so then we took these plant stories and we interjected them with 3 kind of stories about ourselves. And so, the first one, I believe, was a time that you'd felt separated from someone. And these were all deeply personal, intimate stories, right? Every single one was different. So each chorister was telling a different story to a different audience member every time. And then we would be interrupted by construction sounds. Really jarring, right? Because you've got these plant sounds and then this story about something personal, and then all of a sudden, society building, and then we'd cycle around to another audience member, and then start again with the plant stuff, get you back grounded into nature, and then tell another story. And the second story was about a time that you felt connected to land. And so, some people were talking about, oh yeah, this one time I went hiking and blah, blah, blah. And, it was kind of, some of them were really profound stories and some of them were just, whatever. And it was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Like the cacophony of the sounds, the plant songs, the plant information, and then like the cacophony of the stories was really interesting. And then again, construction. Terrible. And then the third one was, it was less of a story and more of them just, what would you say to somebody who had made you feel separated or isolated in the past? And for, 1 or 2 people, that was just a simple F you and step back. And for some people, it was this beautiful, huge, emotional thing, and it was really cool. And then again, construction interrupts, bam. And then we're into Act 3. And Act 3 had begun with the seed story that one of our performers, Ben, had written, which was actually at the end of this this little section last time we performed. So we decided to bump it up to the beginning because it has very positive feelings, and it's like its focus is on how interconnected we are and relating ourselves to trees. And so, again, we didn't really want to leave on a happy note. It just didn't feel genuine to us. So we took that from the end and we put it at the beginning of Act 3. For this performance, another change that we had made is we brought in taiko drummers. The reason for taiko drumming was mainly because taiko drums traditionally are actually made from tree trunks. And so, I mean, yes, they have that, you know, I guess like stereotypically earthy sound, that they also do like have cultural significance in representing, you know, exactly the thing that we were trying to translate, which is, you know, the sound of the trees. And I think it was just a really wonderful way to keep the continuity of being connected with the earth, having that specific set of instruments. Like Kevin and I were feeling pretty good about the show before we brought the taiko drummers in for our dress rehearsal. And then they came that weekend before the show and they played for us, and Kevin and I looked at each other and we were just like, he was like, this just elevated this whole piece. He was like, I am so excited. And I'm like, I know, it's so good. So yeah, that was a really, really critical element of this piece too. And it was very helpful in, you know, grounding the audience while, you know, for, you know, structural purposes, tying each act of the show together and kind of stringing everything along in a way that felt really natural. And it was incredibly on theme, of course. Huge shout out to our taiko drummers. I adore them. They did such a brilliant job, and they were such a critical element of the show. So following the ecological divides tableau, we had the, you know, We Are Together Because, which was something that we had pulled from the first iteration of the show, and that we had spiced up a little bit. So instead of just announcing it once and freezing, we were repeating ourselves to different audience members and going around and talking to the audience members, which, you know, I felt helped convey that a lot more.
We're together because we have found family in each other.
We are together because we love music.
We're together because we chose to
We
get
are
out of bed.
together because we accept each other for who we are.
And again, I guess this takes me back to this whole image of like where we're at as a society now, you know, where you hear this cacophony of people making these statements and it's like, you're just like, you're reaching out but not actually getting anything from anybody. You're just saying to people like, we're together because this, we're together because this, we're together because this, and you just keep repeating it into the void. And it's, again, going back to that whole idea of like, that's our life in this day and age with social media, and we're trying to connect and we're not. It's superficial, it's very surface level. And so, you know, that shift was really, really significant in portraying a clearer image of you know, what we're trying to get at here. Like, you know, it's a nice thing that you're saying, but it's just a bunch of people saying it. We're just all shouting out at the same time. This is just this noise of people saying nice things. But where's the action? The reason why we wanted to have our audience members blindfolded for a majority of the performance is, you know what they say about like, oh, when you lose one sense, all your other senses are heightened. And while that's not necessarily scientifically true, it does help you expand your awareness of the other senses, right? And so when your eyes are closed, you're listening better. And what we wanted to do was like totally, it's kind of, you know, removing the human ego, so to speak, right? You're not looking at things and judging them and you know, projecting whatever your opinions of them are. Like you don't have that visual input to, you know, dump your human crap on, right? So you know, it kind of opens you up a little more to accepting the natural soundscape that's happening around you. And not only the soundscape that the choristers are creating, but like the actual space itself. Yeah, and so another reason why we had the blindfolds is that we wanted to, you know, play with spatial relationships in sound. And so we wanted to explore, you know, what sort of impact do these sounds I'm making or the words that I'm saying to you have if I'm standing 5 feet away from you, as opposed to, you know, right behind you or right in front of you, or, you know, I'm crouched down and speaking or singing into your ear. Or what if I'm just passing by really quickly and I'm going, yeah, you know? And so, yeah, we really wanted to explore the different emotional affects that sound can have relative to where you are in space. Having the blindfolds on obviously helps open the audience up to that experience as well. And then lastly, and probably most obviously, is, you know, the blindfolds kind of represent this idea that we all kind of have our own blinders on in society, right? And so we're all, I mean, look at social media, it's just an echo chamber, right? The algorithm just, you know, feeds you what you want to hear, and all your friends and you're all like-minded people, and you can, if you disagree on something, you can block them, whatever. So you only see and hear what you want to see and hear. And, you know, in a sense, even those of us with the best of intentions have made ourselves blind to what's actually happening around us. And so there's this point in the show, I mean, we're blindfolded for 2/3 of the show, almost a little bit more than that. And there's a point during the show where you know, a choir member literally asks you to take your blindfold off. Like, open your eyes and see what's right in front of you. And the first thing they open their eyes to is the tree image. The choir is the tree. And I think that had such a huge impact, you know. I mean, you could take 1,000,001 things away from that, and I'm not going to tell you what to take away from it because it's meant to be subjective, you know, it's meant to be read into. Sadly, this season, Artio is not running any longer, and we don't know if it will come back for the foreseeable future. It's effectively been canceled. And, you know, it's been a devastating loss for the choir, and it has also been a significant loss for the larger choral community here in Calgary. I really do believe that interdisciplinary, like, choral theater performance is the future of choir, period. And you know, we were at the forefront of it, and it is really unfortunate to see the program canceled for the foreseeable future. That said, I am really, really happy that we got to finish this last project off. You know, after not being able to have one of our large-scale performances since before the pandemic, I know a lot of our choristers really felt like, you know, we didn't have a proper season back after the pandemic, and we didn't really have a proper chance to say goodbye, you know. And the way we found out about the choir, you know, not continuing this year was kind of crummy. It was kind of unexpected. And so I feel as though this project has really given those of us core members of Artio a chance to, you know, do one last big thing together and you know, kind of have our little goodbye moment and carry on. And so, you know, as important as the message of the work is for the audience, this experience has been really important for the choir members personally as well. And I'm just beyond thrilled that we got to have that opportunity. I think in being able to revisit this work and really develop it. The fact that we had so much of the material already there gave us a little more leeway to really closely inspect what we wanted to say and how what we were doing reflected or didn't reflect what we were trying to say. And I think that this time around, what we came out with was a lot clearer and incredibly impactful too. And I think because, you know, the whole membership of the choir had that much more of a stake and more of a creative say in developing the show, it was so much more meaningful and personal. The delivery was just so, it was so real. And I think the audience really got that sense. People walked away from that, you know, kind of shocked. Like they're in a little bit of a state of stun. And you know, it was partially the immersion that the first two acts gave, you know, that, you know, the soundscape taking you on this journey through the birth of the universe and into the forest, and, you know, listening to the trees, listening to the environment, and then, you know, bursting into this story about like, hey, you know, nature is the one thing we all have in common. You know, we're all stewards of the earth. We're visitors on this land, on Treaty 7 land. You know, the majority of the choristers, we are settlers who are guests on this land. But the thing that all humans have in common is that we are all responsible for taking care of the earth. We're all connected. We're all, you know, and in that sense, we're all responsible for one another as well. But shit's not right. So you're like, what are we gonna do about it? And we still ended the work on the one song that we didn't write. The Beatles wrote it because, and it's the same song that we had done in the first iteration of the show. We still ended on that. But we definitely leaned into the sorrowful aspects of it as opposed to the, we're all together, you know. And yeah, I think the combination of that immersion and the like, this story that ends kind of like, it's not good, guys. I think that really left audiences kind of dumbfounded a little bit. There was definitely this sense of, you know, I'm walking away thinking about things, which, I mean, is the goal, certainly. Certainly my goal in the art that I create is, you know, to get people thinking. And, you know, climate change is a very real thing, and you know, all these social divides that we're experiencing are very real things, and I think they're things that, you know, yeah, I want you to walk away and think about it. You know, the goal here was to, you know, yeah, in part, listen to the trees and translate and transcribe what they're saying, and, you know, give that language, give that experience to an audience, while also holding up the mirror and being like, hey, maybe acknowledge that each of us is responsible for this. And so I do believe that this time around it really came across. I think it really hit home. And at the very least, people walked out of it being like, I didn't get it, but I had a really good experience. And sometimes that's fine. Sometimes I think, you know, you just have to be open to walking into something and letting it happen to you. You know, let art just happen to you. Let sound wash over you.